Everybody, it's Melissa Rogozinski with the Marketing Phoenix podcast. And I am really, really excited to have my friend and colleague, Steve Lerner, journalist with Law 360 here with us today. And we're going to talk about pitching tech when you should be pitching solutions. So the problem we see, and we've seen this historically for the last at least 2 decades in legal tech, is, legal tech is often selling their features, their benefits, and all anybody is talking about today is AI. But is that really the problem your law firm customers have? And does that really solve their problems? And unfortunately, largely the answer is no. So we're going to discuss how to really identify your client's pain points and learn to sell solutions to those pain points instead of leading with your features, benefits, technology, and AI. So with that, Steve, would you please, everybody knows you, but go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about your background and we'll get started.
Hey, everybody. I'm Stephen Lerner. I'm a senior reporter for Law 360 Pulse. That's Law 360's business of law coverage. I've been there since 2020. I focus on covering legal technology as well as alternative legal service providers. I write about news and features, cover insights, trends, analysis for the legal tech industry. I write a monthly column called Technically Speaking for Law 360 Pulse, where I talk about legal technology and its impact in the legal industry. And I love doing panels and webinars like this, talking about legal tech, especially this important topic. So thank you, Melissa, for inviting me to today's episode to discuss this critical topic in the legal tech industry.
Of course. And for our audience, just hang on and strap in because we're going to go the distance with this interview. We're going to cover product strategy, marketing, sales, and client success. We have a lot to talk about. And Steve has written prolifically on these topics. So when we publish this podcast and the video, all of those resources will be linked in to the show notes and the description. So you're going to see me looking back and forth because I want to make sure that I ask Steve all the questions. So hang tight. So Steve, let's start with the first one. We're going to talk about product. Why do legal tech vendors often end up solving challenges that aren't real problems for law firms? And how does this impact their ability to really sell solutions?
Yeah, this is a good question. Sales cycles into legal can be notoriously long anyway. You're not helping your sales team if you're focusing more on the technology aspect and less on the business outcome and what that means for law firms, as well as for legal departments that are in search of technical solutions for their teams. Many vendors, and I find this at conferences, talking to vendors outside of conferences too, I noticed that many vendors create what I like to call solutions in search of a problem. And this is where they focus on tools such as dictation software, payment systems, contract platforms that are nice, but they're not really a pain point for a law firm. Law firms, when I speak to them, they're talking about their real pain points, their big challenges: attorney-client retention, remote collaboration, mergers, data security. These are the real challenges. The problem is the vendors often overlook these challenges and focus more on their technology and what it can do as opposed to what it can achieve for that law firm. When this happens, when vendors misdiagnose problems, this often leads to a poor product market fit. It means that firms don't see the value in the tools, and this will slow adoption, and this will prolong those sales cycles. Lawyers are already addressing many of their challenges using creative combinations of existing tools already on the market, some of which their firms have developed in recent years. So that means new entrants and startups, they should research the market thoroughly before launching their products. Vendors, I find, often market very broadly. Sometimes they use outdated tech and they just slap the AI-powered label to their software, to their solution, which I know we are going to talk about later. And that feels great, but it doesn't actually solve the problems for the firm. It doesn't make the product relevant to the needs of the law firm. It creates a mismatch that I find forces longer sales cycles because law firms don't immediately recognize the solution They don't see it as essential, and they don't see it as urgent. This lack of alignment can ultimately hurt vendor sales. It can contribute to layoffs and downsizing in the legal tech sector as well. It's part of the reason why startups sometimes pivot what they're doing, because they came out with a tool originally thinking it would solve the needs for a law firm. In the end, it doesn't. So this is a huge problem, especially with startups who are just trying to find their voice, but even with some legacy players who are coming out with new products all the time. Those products don't always align with the needs of what law firms are going through. And this creates a big mismatch. It hurts sales, and it's a big problem for sure.
I've seen that too when we've worked with startups, and in our onboarding process, we are developing their what we call real client personas. Ideal client personas is a marketing industry term, but what we do is we'll ask them, who are the three titles that you're trying to sell to? And I've been in law for 31 years. Most people know that. I have enough of a network that I can go to my network and I can find two people for each title and ask them to sit with me to go through a persona survey.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll create a composite. So we end up creating 3 composites from real practitioners within those roles. And then that's how we develop the content strategy. And we were doing this for a client in the last year or two, and they had done a little bit of their own work and they sent it to us, and they had not identified pain points. They hadn't identified what they thought were their business goals. They thought their prospects' business goals were to stay on top of the latest and greatest in legal tech news and features and what's out there. And I was like, that's not their business goals. Their business goals are driving revenue, managing clients, managing cases, and managing the staff within those cases, and operating in the most efficient way possible for everyone involved for the best possible outcomes. Had nothing to do with technology. Now, is there a problem within there that technology could answer and help them to be more efficient and achieve those goals? Sure. And so that's, and I'm going to kind of throw a little bit of a curveball at you. Why do you think vendors go in with, oh, I've got this great features and benefits and technology and AI, and why do they lead with that, Steve? And are they trying to force their message? Are they just oblivious, and I'm not trying to be rude, but the way some of them pursue it, do they just not care about the pain points and think they can force the law firm to think, oh, I do have this problem that their technology will solve? Does that make sense what I'm asking? Are they trying to force themselves?
I don't know if they're trying to force themselves necessarily, but there does seem to be I see scenarios where vendors may not understand all of the problems that a law firm is going through today. Most legal tech vendors have at least one co-founder who worked in the legal industry, and that helps, but not every vendor. Sometimes that co-founder may have not been in the legal industry for some time, and especially with technology, things are changing rapidly, and they may not understand some of the nuances today. I think it's just more vendors have come up with some really good technology, and the technology out there is great. It's innovative. It's some of it's really good, but they're just struggling to connect this to the larger issue that what law firms are actually going through on a day-to-day basis. I've been to conferences where I've asked vendors, what makes your product unique in this marketplace? Because there's so many of them. Like, some of them seem very similar. And I'm not just talking about contract tools that seem like they all do the same thing. I'm talking about the legal AI assistant specifically. And so I asked many of the legal AI assistant vendors, what makes your tool stand out? And when they answer my question, they often lead with the technology side of it, which sounds great. It's innovative, but it doesn't actually address what law firms are going through. It's just, so I don't think it's necessarily that they're forcing it. I know that there are vendors who have a narrative. I get requests all the time when I go to conferences to speak to vendors, to have meetings with them and to talk about trends. And I usually when I get those requests, I ask them, okay, if you want to talk about trends specifically, bring in one of your clients, your law firm clients, to that meeting so we can
Mhm.
talk about the trends, the pain points, the challenges, the solutions, all of that. And then sometimes I get a response from the vendor of, well, I don't have a client at this conference. To which I respond, there are over 3,000 people at this conference. If if you don't have a client at this conference, how on earth do you know the trends? How do you know the pain points the law firms are going through? You're telling me what the trends are, but uh, I don't think you know what they are. I get pitches as well from legal tech vendors telling me this is a trend. And I speak to law firms all the time. We have an editorial board made up of mostly people from law firms. And I get pitched all the time about trends that I don't think are really trends because they're not things that law firms are telling me are things that are happening. They're just things that connect to the technology of the vendor. So I don't think it is they're trying to force a narrative. They kind of are. They're trying to wiggle that narrative in there. Um, but it just goes back to the whole mismatch between what the technology is, and some of it can do really well, versus the needs of law firm, and those two things are not always aligned. And that is the big problem.
So, Steve, that leads us to the next question. What can legal tech vendors do to do better market research into what really is going on at law firms, what their pain points are, and what kind of tech, AI, like we kind of need to move a little away from the buzzwords. Like we need to be solving problems. What can legal tech vendors do to do better market research?
That's a good question because market research is important in any industry, but especially in the legal field where sales cycles can be long. Technology is still somewhat new in this field compared to others, so it's important to do market research. Obviously, if you want to find out what's going on in law firms, read Law 360 Pulse. That's the first thing I would tell somebody. Beyond that, some market research that should be conducted include having potential client slash user discussions. They can be on Zoom, they can be in person. Having those types of marketing panels and discussions is a great way to hear from people directly, but also hear them with others who will be in the room either virtually or in person, just to get an idea of what pain points they're going through, what types of tools they're using, that sort of thing. Conducting surveys is another great way. I know a lot of vendors conduct wonderful surveys right now, but most of those tend to be more marketing based surveys. They want the research to go out there. This is internal surveys. Figure out what people are doing internally. That will certainly help. Understand not only their pain points, but where your solution could fit in the market. Because there are other tools out there. You'd be surprised how often vendors don't realize that there's a competitor that does something very similar to what they're already proposing to do. They may not realize that that other vendor exists. So that type of market research is key. Understanding what they do and where that fits in the entire legal tech ecosystem.
And let's do a little name dropping. I'm throwing you another curveball, but I've seen it in your articles. We've talked about it before. It's wise to take a couple steps back and set aside the budget to hire someone like an Ari Kaplan or RPC Strategies. We specifically do product strategy, and we have three categories of competitive intelligence or the product or whatever. There's Brad Blickstein, Amy Jurors with Edge Marketing. There are in the industry, and then with Valerie Chan with Platform, there are in legal tech, there are specific experts who all of us have been lawyers or paralegals. We have 20, 30 years experience in the industry. It makes sense to take a step back and set aside the budget and choose the right one of us for what your goal is, but let someone who within the industry come in and do that outside looking in competitive and market and product research for you. You've written about that too. So what is your opinion about some of that and some of the people you've met in the industry and how that could impact a legal tech's opportunity to be successful?
Yeah, there is a big distinction between the vendors out there who have someone like you or some of the names that you mentioned, Melissa, versus those vendors who don't. And as a journalist, I could tell the difference right away. Someone who relies on that third party help, you could tell that they understand the importance of getting their message out there correctly and trying to understand where the market is versus those vendors who haven't sought that type of help and might be oblivious to it. So absolutely, speaking to a third party who can craft your message, figuring out where your tool might fit in the industry. They have connections, with journalists like myself, but they also have connections with other vendors, and they will know where your product fits into the market and the best way to get that product out to the market. The names you mentioned, they all have experience doing just that. So that's probably somewhere where I would go. If I was just starting a brand new startup in legal tech, you would contact someone like you or some of those other names you mentioned just to get the word out there correctly. Make sure that your messaging dominates the market in a way that makes sense and connects to those law firms out there who are going through major problems right now and trying to connect to those pain points. So absolutely.
And we have access and network and relationships and friends who are potential buyers of these technologies too. So, and it's not to help you prospect, but it's to help you do the right market research and get you the right answers to frame the messaging.
Yep. You understand. You have the buyer side as well. You understand not only what their pain points, you have those connections, different job titles, different types of law firms, different sizes. So that helps for sure as well.
That's another conversation for another time. But there's also chasing the AM laws and the corporate legal departments, which has been done for decades. But the small to mid-sized market, that seems to be kind of where the light has gone on. But that's where I've spent my entire 31 years. And we're seeing that conversation now that legal tech is realizing, oh, SMB, there's an opportunity there. They need help. You're right. 80% of the law firm industry is the SMB market. So anyway, we have so much to talk about. Let's move into marketing, because we said we were going to cover product marketing, sales, and client success. So let's move into marketing. So you wrote an article that AI tool your law firm is using, it's not really AI. You compared AI and machine learning to cooking when you said AI is the master chef who can create delicious dishes, and machine learning is the cookbook with recipes designed to help cooks improve over time. So let's talk a little bit about this, the overuse of the word and the buzzword in it, AI. Go, Steve. You talk about whatever you want to on that. Let's address that and let's put it where it belongs.
Yeah, I mean, we could do an entire 5-hour podcast on AI claims, especially in the legal tech industry. Look, there's nothing wrong with machine learning. Let me just start off with that. A lot of legal tech tools have machine learning baked in, and machine learning is great. I'm not trying to dunk on machine learning, but what I often find are vendors who have old school machine learning, which is totally fine, and marketing their product as we're an AI-based company, we're an AI-based product, and that's great. And machine learning is certainly related to AI, but there's a big difference between a product that just uses machine learning versus a product where not only does it use generative AI or agentic AI, but that company has data scientists on staff, and they're actually creating different systems based on that AI to fit the needs of the legal industry. So this is something I've noticed. In terms of a lot of the AI claims, you see it in e-discovery, you see it in contract management, vendors who are using basic machine learning or algorithms labeling themselves as AI. These are vendors who claim their tools are AI based when it's just using machine learning or algorithms. This is called AI washing. It's when vendors either brand themselves as AI when they're not, or they're just connecting to a third-party generative AI tool, such as GPT or Anthropic or some of the other generative AI tools out there. They're just connecting to that tool, and now all of a sudden we're an AI company. You are, but at the same time, to market yourself as an AI company is sometimes a bit disingenuous. Some vendors I find market non-commercial or unreleased generative AI tools as well, as if they were fully functional. We've seen this in the past few years where a company, especially at a major legal tech conference, will come out with a product saying we're releasing our generative AI tool. And then when you read the fine print, it's like, well, we're not really releasing it yet. It's only in beta and it's only for certain firms, certain clients, you can use it, and it's only for certain use cases. And even then, it's not fully accurate and perfect in any imagination. This is also part of the problem. The overall trend that I'm finding is vendors overuse the AI label as a marketing tactic. Part of the reason they're doing it is to attract investors. We've seen a lot of investors in the past few years support the legal tech industry, and they're interested in backing AI tools. I understand that. And in labeling your slide decks for your investors as AI, I can understand why one would do that. It's different for a law firm, for the client, especially if the tool itself isn't technically using AI. That is an issue. Sometimes vendors use the AI label to stay relevant. Sometimes they're doing it to play into lawyers who feel like they're going to feel left out. They're FOMO if they don't get an AI tool on board. A great way, if you are speaking to a vendor and you're curious, are they really an AI tool, is ask them if they have any data scientists on staff. If they don't, they're probably not an AI tool. They're just connecting to a third-party AI tool, and they may have a knowledge base that connects to that. That knowledge base and the rest of the systems might be really good, but it's not really an AI tool. Talk to the vendors who have the AI staff, the data scientist on their team, because to your point, Melissa, this AI label, it keeps getting dropped everywhere, and it's a big problem. Many law firms and in-house legal departments are feeling overwhelmed with AI all the time, and it doesn't do them a service if you're telling them that your product is AI when in fact it may not actually be artificial intelligence.
I'm thinking of a couple of things. We wrote an AI security questionnaire and blog article on how a guide how to use it last year because this conversation was coming up, and I realized so many lawyers and law firms they don't have somebody. Maybe the AmLaws have someone in house who has the experience, but most of the SMBs don't. So I got together with a couple of AmLaw executives and I said, look, I see this need. I'm not necessarily the expert on the security of this. But I had two of them that helped me write the article. We wrote the questionnaire. And then at the time I was volunteering with the Law and Tech Committee for the Miami-Dade Bar Association. And we did a CLE on it for our membership and talked about that. So, that's another resource that I'll put in the show notes and description that's available to everybody. You don't have to be the expert. You've got people like Steve, like me, like the others that we mentioned earlier that can help you navigate this. So this segues into the next question too. So you wrote another article, be wary of legal tech companies claiming to be first. So let's talk a little bit about how marketing can rework their communications, both for marketing and sales. And how do you evolve the buzzwords of first or AI into really communicating with the prospect? It's not about the tech or being first or about AI. How do you use that terminology to tell the story and make your prospect or your client the hero? So what are your thoughts on how marketing needs to evolve these communications?
Good question. It kind of goes back to the labels that you're using. We talk about the AI-based label. Well, first is another big label that gets dropped a lot in legal tech and is starting to lose its meaning. I notice this as a journalist. We get pitched all the time stories from vendors claiming to be the first at something, when in reality, if you do a little bit of research or if you know the industry at all, you know that vendor's not the first at what they're claiming to be. Or if they are the first, it's a very narrow first that they're claiming to be first in. It's common for many legal tech companies to announce they're first at something. I like to call this first fever. We're the first to do this, the first to do that. It's not just the legal industry problem. It happens everywhere, but it's happening more often in legal tech as the sector grows, as more companies adopt AI, as more venture capitalists get into the space. Bragging about being first has grown in all parts of legal tech, but especially in the contract software space. These businesses are under intense pressure from all the investors in the past few years who poured money into their startups. And so they want to try to raise a few eyebrows, claims of being innovative, claims of being first. We're at the point in the legal tech sector where claiming to be first sometimes blurs that line between innovation and marketing. It's a disservice to those who actually are offering quality products. And in my opinion, buyers of legal tech don't really care if you're first. They just care what's best. Even if what you're claiming is true, that you're the first at something, it's not the most powerful claim. So going back to your point, Melissa, instead of saying we're the first, we're AI powered, we're connected with this, we use multiple models, the marketing language should be driven on business outcomes. We help you retain clients. That's a business outcome. We secure the data in your law firm to prevent uh, data breaches. We help lawyers cut down their time so they can focus on other work. We help lawyers retain the work-life balance that they need. We help train your lawyers to get them up to speed. Whatever the business outcomes are, that should be in the marketing material. If you put that in the marketing materials, you'll connect with the buyers. Even when you're at a legal tech conference and it's the IT leaders who are there, the IT leaders in law firms are becoming more business oriented the past few years. They understand the needs of the lawyers and the partners in the firm and their business needs. And if you pitch your product with a business outcome, it will resonate with everybody in the law firm, including the IT team. So when it comes to marketing material, focus on the business outcome, focus less on we're first. That's the way I like to say it.
Focus on the business outcome. I love that. I'm going to pull that quote as I'm going to make that a clip. And when we drop this episode, that was perfect.
Sure.
Well, okay, then that leads us into sales, because now we've addressed product, we've addressed marketing, and now sales can do their job. They have the product, marketing has worked the messaging, we've got the messaging correct. All right, so how can sales teams better translate technical features into business outcomes for law firms?
So I'm not sure if I mentioned this example before, but I see this often at legal tech conferences where I go to a vendor's booth. Most of the people in the booth are going to be the sales reps, and they start pitching me their product. They maybe don't realize I'm press, or maybe they do realize I'm press, but they're still giving me the pitch. And I ask them, hey, what makes your product unique? You know, there's so many other tools here at this conference that do very similar things, that pitch themselves as being AI assistants. What makes your tool unique? And I often get the answer of, oh, we use multiple models, so we're different than these other tools out there. Here's the problem with that answer from the sales rep. First, there are many AI tools in the legal field that use multiple models. Almost all of them use multiple models. But more importantly, that doesn't actually address the needs of the law firm. So what if you have different models? It's not, unless the business outcome has changed, that means nothing to a law firm. It means nothing to a legal department. You need to focus your sales pitch on what that business outcome is. It's very similar to marketing in that you should focus more on the actual business outcome of what law firms need. That's probably the biggest thing. It's simple as it is. When someone asks what makes you unique, make sure you focus on that. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. If you're at a conference like ILTACon, which is there's a heavy focus on the IT leaders at law firms, and they're going to talk about technology. And so there are times when you're talking to an IT leader in which you will have to discuss the technical specs of the product. Absolutely. But generally speaking, when you're talking to buyers, focus on their actual pain points. Focus on what keeps them up at night. If your team has done its research, if you've worked with third parties, if you've done market research, you should know the answers to those questions. Do that first, and you will have better pitches at legal tech conferences and meetings with potential buyers. So that would be my advice for salespeople.
You started your answer off with an experience that I also had. I walked up to a vendor who is shattering ceilings. I'm not going to mention him by name. And it's a startup. And I walked up and I said, I'm so excited to meet you and see you. And I want to learn more. And, I said, I have to go do something. Maybe I had to attend another session or something. And I said, but I'm coming back because I want to learn what you do. And there were like 6 of them there. And this one guy stands up and he's like, oh, we can do everything. And I was like, I said, number one, you didn't even ask me my name. You don't know who I am. You don't know what company I work for. You don't know what my business goals are, what my pain points are. You don't even know if I'm a prospect, which I'm not. You're the same thing, Steve. You're not a prospect. And I said, but you also, because you don't know who I am, you don't know what kind of prospects I might be connected to. So I'm going to go do my other session and I'm going to come back. I came back, got a different person. He's like, are you ready to see a demo? What is your name? Hi, I'm Melissa Rogozinski. Everybody calls me Rogo. My company's RPC Strategies. Let me just start this for you. Mm-hmm. And so I went through this twice and I made him sit down and talk to me. And it wasn't intentional, but we talked for 45 minutes and we never got to the demo. I wanted to get to know him. I wanted him to get to know me. And we ran out of time, had to go do something else. And so I ended up coming back a third time. And this time a sales rep, she started correctly and she identified herself, asked me who I was, got a little bit more information. She goes, well, I understand, you chatted with this person, you chatted with that person. What can I show you? What would you like to see? What would help you? How can I help you? And actually, this came up in a podcast interview with Corey Douglas, and we did a clip on it. And it was, what is the most important question a legal tech sales rep can ask? And it was, how can I help you?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about your next article. Legal tech companies raise pay to attract big law attorneys. I'm really excited to hear your insights on this. We've talked about this throughout our conversation. It seems to be maybe in the last 5 years. I'm got a pretty good number there that legal tech has started either hiring or being founded by practitioners. And when I say practitioners, I know your article really talks about the lawyers and like the junior lawyers at AmLaws making a change. But I was a paralegal. I was not a lawyer. And I made the change 21 years ago from law firm to legal tech. So we have lawyers, we have paralegals, we have litigation support, we have law firm practitioners making the change into legal tech. So your article talk about this trend. Why is this practice? Why do you think it's so much more important now than it was, say, 20 years ago? Why is there more focus? Why is this happening now in the last few years? What seems to be driving this?
So that's a great question. Let's take a step back. There are more legal tech vendors now than ever in this space. This past year at ILTACON, there were over 200 vendors. I think that was a record for that conference. And other conferences as well have seen an explosion of vendors. That doesn't even include all the vendors who aren't there. There's some categories like contract software where there might be hundreds of vendors already. And so law firms in particular are being inundated with pitches all the time, and not just at a conference, but emails, phone calls. I get the same emails as a journalist. I'm on the same list as his law firm, so I get the same pitches and sometimes the same phone calls as well. So they're being inundated with that. And so to stand out, some vendors are realizing it helps to have a salesperson, especially that initial rep who has been in a law firm before, who has either worked as a lawyer or paralegal. That type of experience is critical. Their experiences can speak to what law firms are actually going through. They understand those needs. So it's important. So that's why you're seeing more vendors get sales reps with law firm experience. Now, the problem with that is traditionally vendors couldn't pay what an associate made in a law firm. Associates made a lot of money, and a sales rep for most vendors, not just in legal, but most vendors, doesn't compare to what an associate might make in a law firm. Well, as you noticed, Melissa, in the past few years, that has changed. And a big reason that has changed is we've seen more investors in legal tech who are pouring money into vendors, billions of dollars every year. Last year was a record in legal tech funding, and this year is shaping up to be another big year in 2025. Because of that influx of cash, some legal tech vendors can actually hire people with law firm experience, associates, and pay them a salary that's comparable to what they actually made in a law firm. So now you're seeing this trend of vendors who have people with experience and they can afford them, and they can sell directly to law firms. And so that makes a big difference. So that to me is why we've seen this big increase the past few years, of why you're seeing more hiring of people with law firm experience in vendors. It's because of the additional monies that have been poured into the sector through investors.
How do you think that impacts a legal tech's ability to sell its market and sell its product?
It impacts it a lot. It creates more pressure because now that investor wants a return. They backed you at a certain valuation, and now they want you to get that return. And so typically, especially if private equity gets involved, they might try to cut spending at that vendor. That might happen, but they're going to want to see an increase in sales too. And so it creates more pressure. As we mentioned earlier in this episode, Melissa, sales cycles are long, especially in legal. And so that added pressure certainly doesn't help, but it is a motivator. It's why you might feel as a law firm, your vendors are more pushy now than they previously were. And so back to my earlier point that law firms are being inundated with more pitches and you're trying to stand out. Well, you try to stand out by hiring law firm talent, but the cycle continues because they're going to be pushy. They're going to try to sell their product as well to you. So it's a never ending cycle for sure. But it all goes back to the investors and the pressures that are put on to legal tech vendors who are trying to make a sale at the end of the day.
What are so you've attended, you attend all of the major legal tech conferences, Steve. What are some of the roles or positions within legal tech vendors that seem to make the most impact to that bottom line, where these law firm practitioners can offer the most value?
Mm-hmm. So I don't go to every conference. There's still plenty I've never been to, but what do you mean by roles? What exactly do you mean?
Business development, subject matter expert. Do you see them in marketing roles? Do you see them in direct sales roles, or is it more, the business development side? What executive roles? What kind of roles do you typically see law firm practitioners filling in these legal tech vendors?
So it does vary by vendor. Some of it is a business development role. Going back to my earlier point, business development roles in most industries, not just legal, don't have the same salary as an associate at a law firm. That is starting to change in this sector as certain vendors want salespeople with associate law firm experience. So that is changing, but it's not just business development. Evangelist is another title that we see in the vendor world, not just for law firms, but for in-house legal teams as well. Those are folks who've worked on the front lines. Maybe they were lawyers or paralegals in big law or in corporate law, and now all of a sudden they're the expert for a vendor. They're talking up what the vendor can do, but they're also providing thought leadership and different thought leadership content online and in person to help drum up sales. Of course, most legal tech startups are going to be co-founded by somebody with legal experience. Not all the time, but majority of them are. So that we're seeing more people with law firm experience enter the C-suite for legal tech vendors as well. So it varies. It's SMEs. It's also business development, and it's C-suite. So it's all of the above.
Okay, so we've talked about product, marketing, and sales. So we get all of this right. We kind of started calling this, between you and me, we call this episode Pitch Rehab. So we're trying to teach people how to rehab your pitch, and you can still talk about your technology and you can use your buzzwords, but just don't lead with it, right? really understand the pain points of your prospect and your client and start telling that story and work back from there, right? So let's say we've got a legal tech vendor that has listened to our episode. They're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And they start implementing everything you and I are trying to teach them. They go read all your articles. And wow, look at this. We're closing winning more deals, right? We're driving more growth, more revenue. Okay. Now we're going to hand it off to the client success team. So we want to make sure we keep these clients. We want to make sure that we create some loyalty, and that they tell their buddies about us, right? And start referring us. So you wrote an article called Consolidation is Slowly Killing Legal Tech Innovation. Right. So you state that, what do you mean by slowly killing innovation? And you mentioned M&A diluting customer service, client success, these mega businesses. And I've seen several of them. I've seen that trend too. I've interviewed with several legal tech companies about doing some fractional work. And we did a competitive intelligence project recently for a company. And what we're seeing is, where 20 years ago, you and I, we'd go to legal tech. It's still legal tech to me. We'd see the e-discovery hall. We see court reporting. We see practice management, right? But now, like Filevine acquired court report, so a court reporting company. You're seeing, a company like Array. They've got process service, medical record retrieval, court reporting, e-discovery services, like trial services. So you're seeing these mega businesses start to evolve and these end-to-end solutions, which on one side of the coin makes sense, but there's another side to that coin. And you talk about the impact to true innovation and entrepreneurship in your article. So talk about, why do you say consolidation is slowly killing legal tech innovation?
So consolidation is a problem in any industry, but especially now, the past few years in legal tech, consolidation has been a real problem. I understand the benefits of consolidation. It's a great way to grow revenue and market share, but long term, there are issues. Customer service is one issue that I find, especially speaking to law firms, gets deprioritized as there's an acquisition. I'm not going to name drop vendors, but I've heard many complaints from law firms saying that, okay, we use this tool, it got acquired, and now the customer service has lacked. They have shrunk their customer service department, and it's not the same. We can't speak directly to our rep anymore. Now we have to speak to somebody at the larger company who may not understand our firm's needs anymore. That's a big issue. Innovation is another issue. As there's more consolidation, typically with vendors who have been backed by private equity, those vendors try to cut down spending on research and development. And as you cut down on research and development spending, you're going to eventually cut down on innovation. And that's why you see some vendors, their innovation is, we're announcing a partnership, which is basically just a fancy way of saying we have an API connection to another vendor, which sounds nice, but that's not quite innovation necessarily. That is part of the problem. As these mega businesses dominate and grow in legal tech, they limit the competition, and it makes it more difficult for attorney entrepreneurs to get in and launch their own new tools as well. I often find that companies in legal tech that get acquired often become too distracted on or focused on recouping investments instead of focusing on innovation. As they're growing and as they're big, they're going to stagnate, and they may not focus on innovation as much. It's a drain on legal tech. To give an example, we've seen a lot of consolidation in the past few years in legal services, court reporting, as well as document review. It used to be very regionalized. Now it's become nationalized the past few years. E-discovery has seen a lot of consolidation as well. The good news about e-discovery, just to use that as an example, there are a lot of upstarts right now. A lot of younger companies that are involved in e-discovery and litigation technology, and they're going to start challenging in the next few years some of the big players unless they get acquired. And so even though these things are bad, consolidation does hurt innovation, there is a cyclical nature to it where, yes, the e-discovery industry right now is basically just a handful of companies. It's consolidated, but we're seeing startups enter the field, and they will, at the very least, maybe nudge some of the big e-discovery software vendors to adapt, make some changes down the line. But overall, innovation is a problem in legal tech. It is great in legal tech, but it is a problem if there's too much consolidation, which is happening right now in the industry.
Interesting you would say that, because I have a colleague right now who has approached me, not even in the space, but got involved in litigation with because of his business. And the law firm used one of the big name e-discovery technologies, and the guy was just blown away by how expensive it was. And he did more research, and he goes, "This is nuts." He said, here's what they needed, and I just built my own technology to do it. I can do it better. I can do it cheaper. And the solo, and like we said before, he said solo and small firms, they can't afford this because it's too expensive. And the larger these companies get, like we said, one side of the coin is this end-to-end solution, but the other side of the coin is that it's just simply gotten too expensive, and the customer service is taking a hit as a result. So it's a two-sided sword, because is it stifling innovation? It is. But then here we are 20 years later, and we've got some startups. You've seen some, I've seen some, we've represented some. I've got another one talking to me. I honestly, I have to admit, I thought innovation in the e-discovery might have, kind of been on the down curve. But because of these mega businesses consolidating, it's actually opening up a gap.
Yes, there is a gap. You're absolutely right. You look at any major legal tech conferences, they might have a startup section sometimes, and you go there and you talk to the vendors. Some of them are in e-discovery, and some of them are in investigations, and that's helpful. They're going to push where the industry is going. Eventually, the larger vendors will either create their own version, maybe they'll get acquired. We often write about acquisitions at Law 360 and, celebrating everything, but it does have a negative impact. It does hurt, at least in the short term, potentially long term, some innovation. But hopefully there are some brave lawyer entrepreneurs out there who develop new tools over time to change the industry for the better.
All right. So I have two more questions for you before we wrap this up. All right. So I love this monthly post that you do, and you get so much attention for it. And thank you for doing it for all of us in legal tech. You know which one I'm talking about. How long have you been doing this? What caused you to start this? And what are the cycles that you've seen since you've been doing it? And where do you think we're going in the next year to 2 to 3? And tell everybody what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably show a screenshot here, but every month I've been doing it since, I think, January 2022, where I take a look at legal tech funding over the past month, the previous month, and compare that year over year to the same month in the previous year. I have been keeping track of every legal tech funding for almost 5 years since I started. I also keep track of M&A and try to keep track of hires and partnerships as well. But the reason I did that when I first started at Law 360 almost 5 years ago was I was fresh to this industry, brand new, and I wanted to understand what was going on. I know things are constantly changing, and for me, writing things down helps a lot. So that's why I made a whole spreadsheet, and I keep track of all the legal tech funding in the industry. And so after the first year doing that, I noticed that in 2022, the funding was starting to decline. It was different than what I noticed in 2021. So I started doing these monthly posts that you alluded to on social media, where I compare funding month over month and see any trends that are happening. And it's a very popular post. I still do those every month. In terms of where the industry is now, obviously AI is still big in terms of where a lot of funding is going. That seems to be driving it. The past year has been great. We've seen a lot of funding this past year. Last year was a record breaking. 2025 is shaping up to be potentially record-breaking, but we'll see. There were some big mega deals last year in 2024.
Clio.
Clio,
Everybody, Clio
Clio.
and VLAX.
Yes. There's still some big acquisitions this year. In fact, it looks like in Q3, as Q3 wraps up, it looks like that might have seen a big increase in M&A activity year over year. So there seems to be a lot more consolidation right now, for sure. In terms of where things are going, I don't like to look too far ahead unless I use machine learning or some algorithm. I don't like to look too far ahead. But I do think right now you're seeing a lot of vendors who are taking on debt. And something has to be done with that in the next few years, that's for sure. And then some of the big rounds that have been raised in legal tech this year, those vendors want repayment, or they want an IPO, or they want to get acquired. And so, or that startup might shut down, as we've seen as well. So something is going to happen in the next 3 to 4 years to a lot of the vendors who have taken money in the past year or two. Either they're going to keep growing, get more investor money, either they're going to get acquired, maybe someone might IPO, or they might shut down, some of the smaller ones in particular, who don't have too many clients. But that's kind of where I see it. And I do enjoy making those posts. I know a lot of people like those posts I do every month. And I'm glad people are finding value in it as well.
All right. So final question to wrap up. We have been talking about pitch rehab, selling value, not tech. And we have addressed this in 4 categories: product, marketing, sales, and client success. What are your final words and best advice to really summarize what we've been discussed, and what should legal tech vendors take away from this in order to help them be those companies that succeed and grow?
Mm-hmm. Product, market, sales, they're all connected in legal and in every industry for that matter. Here, with longer sales cycles, it is critical to get it all right. So just my tips as a journalist covering the industry: know the pain points, know what keeps law firms and or in-house legal teams up at night. Develop your products in a way that matches those pain points. For sure, you should absolutely do that. Develop marketing material and have them be in alignment with salespeople to make sure that they're actually talking about business outcomes. Working with a third party always helps. Somebody who understands the industry and someone who can help you craft a message that fits the needs of law firms. If you get the messaging right, you're halfway there. And so focus on the business outcomes. That's probably the biggest takeaway I have, and certainly one of the big takeaways from today's discussion.
And how can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out to you and connect, Steve?
LinkedIn's always good. I'm on X as well, but the LinkedIn's always good. You can also email me, steven.lerner@law360.com.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Delighted to have my good friend and colleague, Steve Lerner, with us. And I knew this was going to be an exciting and just packed conversation. So, Steve, thank you so much for making time to join me on the Marketing Phoenix podcast today.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.